Hello again. I always enjoy watching politicians lie to people. It's one of the harmless pleasures in my life. Obviously, we know that the man or woman making extravagant promises when an election is in the wind has no real intention of doing what he or she says, if there is a way possibly to wriggle out of it afterward. Nevertheless, most politicians at least set some kind of limit on their lies because they know that they will be reminded of all those phony pledges if they get into power. So far, so good, and Labour are in good company when it comes to behaviour of that kind. Both the Conservatives and the Liberal Party are also in the habit of offering far more than they're going to be able to perform when they're fighting a general election. However, Labour have been just a little too extravagant in what they've said they will do once they're in power. And to many people, even those who voted for them, this has been a little bit much to swallow. Keir Starmer was wringing his hands for a couple of years before the election about the plight of old folk who couldn't afford to heat their homes. He told heartrending stories about old people who stayed in bed all day because they couldn't afford to turn the heating on. Just 2 years ago, in the summer of 2022, Starmer had a fully costed plan to freeze energy bills, primarily for the sake of these poor old people. Indeed, he said that this was essential to do anyway to halt inflation. In the description to this video, I give a link to a newspaper article in which this was reported, and I quote from the article. Keir Starmer has said Labour's plan to freeze energy bills, funded in part by an expanded windfall tax, is the radical approach needed to help households and reduce inflation, contrasting it with the inaction of a lame duck government. I hope that this is quite clear. The year before last, Keir Starmer was so worried about people, especially old people, being unable to afford to heat their homes that he planned to freeze energy costs and had worked out a viable financial plan for doing so. He was elected less than 2 years after making this claim, and far from freezing energy bills, they've increased by 10% in time for the winter. And at the same time, 10 million pensioners have been deprived of the winter fuel payments. Seriously, I can't be the only one who remembers this. This is a deliberate and calculated lie made with the sole intention of getting people to vote for him. When in opposition, Starmer's deputy Angela Rayner said, and I quote from an article she wrote less than 4 years ago, "Labour will be different. We have pledged to abolish tuition fees, and we mean it. I will be honoured to deliver this pledge in government." Instead, of course, tuition fees are due to rise. For years, prominent members of the present government, including the Prime Minister himself, have made endless offers to give people things for nothing or to reduce or freeze the cost of those things. Not only have they never intended to do those things, they've also planned before the election to do things which they never said a word about when people were preparing to vote. For example, a private member's bill on euthanasia is to be given time in the parliamentary timetable, and a free vote is promised on it. That wasn't in the manifesto, and not a word was said about it before the election. As I say, all this lying and the broken promises are nothing new. We've certainly seen enough of that sort of thing with the Tories. It is the industrial scale of the dishonesty and the magnitude of the falsehoods which rather puts the present administration into a league of its own.